For more on this energy crisis that's coming up, we're joined by Klisman Murati. He's the founder of Pareto Economics, a global world affairs research consultancy firm. Good to see you. I'm so confused. I mean, I thought we had a crisis and oil prices spiked up, but then oil prices have dropped back down significantly, and now we have the Ukrainians, seemingly make very good progress. And I'm putting these two things together. Are the markets predicting that Ukraine will continue to gain ground, and therefore that will lead to the end of the conflict, and that's why oil prices are coming down? Tell me where I'm wrong.
So that's a good question. And I think if you're relying on the financial or the financiers to now be generals or military strategists, I think you're having your eggs in the wrong basket. Because I don't think the financial world can truly really understand the military landscape of what's happening in Ukraine, and then afterwards translate that into financial moves which will benefit them. So I don't think that's what's going on here. I think what's happening is that the market is still trying to stabilize itself and find a point in which demand and supply is equally accounted for. But this is very difficult to do in a situation where we have so many variables which are unpredictable or very hard to foresee, and therefore you see a lot of change happening in the markets. But it's not a case of the financiers or the financial markets betting that something will happen, because I don't think they truly understand what is actually happening on the ground.
Right. So half the experts we speak to say there will be an energy crisis of epic proportions this year in Europe. And the other half say, well, they've saved up enough gas. There's still gas coming from outside of other areas, whether it's the U.S. or the rest of the world, and they'll be just fine. Yes, they'll pay a little more, but there won't be a crisis. Which one is it?
Well, you define crisis for me, Phil, because I think what a crisis is to one household is different to another household. But what the EU is trying to do now fundamentally is make sure that the inflation problem in Europe is accounted for, and in terms of helping people manage this. Because some families are being impacted, but not as much as others. Okay, and that runs on sort of a Pareto distribution curve, where you have the majority suffering, but sort of a small minority not as much. Which is why I think on Wednesday we'll see some proposals from the EU in terms of what they will do to combat this. And really there's only two things they can do. They can either windfall taxes in different ways, shapes or forms, or conserve energy so that households and businesses aren't paying as much because they're not using as much. So they're very in a tight position here.
The solution to all this, I mean, they could obviously, like you said, save or turn down the heat. But is the problem a shortage of gas or a shortage of ships to move the gas?
So that's a very specific point in this chaos that we see unfolding in front of our eyes. The first thing that the EU wanted to do, at least symbolically, and follow through with in terms of action, is try to defend the people of Ukraine from Russian aggression. That was the picture that was painted. And what they were certain on is that Russia will combat this in their own way, shape, and form. But the way in which this has played out has really hurt Europe in many different ways. It's also hurt Russia for sure. But what they're in a position now is trying to find out how they can diversify their energy supply from different vendors. And we see, for example, Italy doing deals with Algeria in order to receive supply from other vendors. And this is what the EU are going to struggle throughout the rest of this year and into next year. Because if supply from Russia is not forthcoming, and if putting caps on what Russian energy prices would be is not happening because they U-turned on that idea, their options are very limited. And this is what's causing the energy price in different parts of Europe to fluctuate, which is not helping the end consumer because they are paying more for their energy bills in the long term.
Right. So here's kind of a supply and demand question. If Russia is not sending the oil to Europe, but they're sending the oil, say, to another country, at the end of the day, the other country isn't going to buy the oil from the open market either, and so there is kind of an equilibrium, right? So maybe, in a weird way, the worst is over?
That's what I think many people are hoping for. But the worst is a case in point which impacts different people again in different ways. For a business owner, a small business owner who has lost their business, the worst has already happened and it's gone, right? For the student who is trying to study and trying to make some money to support him or herself through studies, this is an ongoing crisis. And for a business owner who now needs to restructure their debt, this is, again, an ongoing crisis. So depending on who you're speaking on, they'll give you where they think they are in that crisis arc, if you know what I mean. So this is a very individual crisis for everyone involved, but the political leaders are trying to come up with solutions which, in a utilitarian way, do the most good for the most number. And this is very difficult in times like this.
All right. Klisman Murati, I really appreciate you staying up late for us and joining us on the show and helping us understand a fairly complicated situation. Really appreciate it. We will see you again soon.
Have a good day.